The fluorescent lights of the Riverside Diner flickered with their usual tired rhythm, casting uneven shadows across the checkered linoleum floor that had seen better decades. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday, the kind of hour when the world feels suspended between day and night, when the desperate and the deliberate find themselves sharing space in places that never close. The air hung thick with the mingled scents of burnt coffee, fryer oil that needed changing, and the faint sweetness of maple syrup that had seeped into the very walls over 30 years of operation. Maya Chen stood behind the counter, her black hair pulled back in a ponytail that had loosened over the course of her double shift, wispy strands framing a face that was younger than her eyes suggested. At 28, she carried herself with a particular weariness of someone who had learned early that life rarely offered second chances, that every opportunity had to be seized with both hands and held tight. Her uniform, a pale blue dress with white piping and a name tag that read Maya in cheerful letters that contradicted the establishment's atmosphere, bore the evidence of her shift. A coffee stain near the hem, a smudge of ketchup on the sleeve, the accumulated proof of hours spent in motion. She was refilling the sugar dispensers, a mindless task that allowed her thoughts to wander to the anatomy textbook waiting in her locker, to the nursing school entrance exam she'd scheduled for next month. The diner was nearly empty, just 3 tables occupied. A truck driver nursing his 4th coffee, a young couple sharing a piece of pie with 2 forks, and the new arrival who had walked in 5 minutes ago. Maya had noticed him immediately, the way she noticed all her customers, not just with the professional attention of someone working for tips, but with the deeper observation she'd been cultivating through her pre-nursing courses and her own natural instinct. He was perhaps in his early 50s, wearing a suit that even her untrained eye recognized as expensive, the kind of tailoring that whispered rather than shouted wealth. His salt and pepper hair was styled with casual precision, and when he'd walked in, there had been a slight hesitation in his step, as though he wasn't accustomed to diners like this one, wasn't sure of the protocol. Marcus Whitfield, though Maya didn't know his name yet, had chosen the corner booth, the one with the slightly torn vinyl seat that offered a view of both the door and the street beyond the large windows. He'd been on his phone when he entered, speaking in low, clipped tones about quarterly reports and board meetings, but he'd ended the call as he sat down, slipping the device into his jacket pocket with a gesture that suggested deliberate disconnection. "What can I get you?" Maya had asked, approaching with her pad and pen, her smile automatic but not entirely false. Years of service work had taught her the delicate balance between friendliness and efficiency, between being present and being invisible. He looked up at her then, and there had been something in his expression, a kind of exhaustion that went deeper than physical tiredness, a weariness of the soul that Maya recognized because she'd seen it in her own mirror on harder days. "What do you recommend?" he'd asked, and his voice carried the hint of an accent she couldn't quite place, something that spoke of international schools and boardrooms that spanned continents. Maya had glanced at the laminated menu he hadn't opened. "The meatloaf is surprisingly good. Chef makes it with herbs from his garden. The grilled cheese is classic. If you want breakfast, the omelet special comes with home fries and toast." She had paused, then added with a slight smile, "I'd skip the fish, unless you like it rubber." He'd surprised her by laughing, a genuine sound that seemed to catch even him off guard. "Meatloaf, then, and coffee, black. Any allergies I should know about?" The question was automatic, something she'd started asking after her pre-nursing instructor had emphasized the importance of always checking, of never assuming. "None that I know of," he'd said, already reaching for his phone again, the moment of connection sliding away as quickly as it had arrived. Now, 15 minutes later, Maya watched from behind the counter as Billy, the line cook, slid the plate onto the pass-through window. The meatloaf sat in a pool of gravy, flanked by mashed potatoes and green beans that still had some snap to them. She'd grabbed the plate, added a side of bread from the basket, and crossed the diner's expanse with the easy efficiency of someone who had walked this path thousands of times. "Here you go," she'd said, setting the plate down carefully. Fresh ground pepper? He'd looked up from his phone, and she'd caught a glimpse of his screen, a photo of two children, teenagers maybe, grinning at the camera with the unconsciousness joy of youth. No thank you, this looks perfect. She'd left him to it, returning to her tasks, to the rhythm of closing duties that would stretch past midnight if she let them. The truck driver paid his bill, leaving a modest tip and a nod of thanks. The young couple lingered over their pie, lost in each other in the way that made Maya feel both wistful and ancient, remembering when she had been that young, that certain that love would be enough. She was wiping down the counter, thinking about her daughter Lily asleep at her mother's apartment, when she heard it. A sound that was wrong. So fundamentally wrong that it cut through the ambient noise of the diner like a discordant note in a familiar song. A chair scraping, harsh and urgent. A gasping sound, wet and desperate. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps me bring you more incredible true stories like this one. Maya's head snapped up, her body already moving before her conscious mind fully processed what she was seeing. The man in the corner booth, Marcus, though she still didn't know his name, was half standing, one hand clutching his throat, the other braced against the table. His face had gone an alarming shade of red, mottled and swelling even as she watched. His lips were beginning to turn blue at the edges, and his eyes were wide with the kind of primal terror that transcends language. "Oh God," Billy said from the kitchen window, his voice high and tight. "Is he choking? Should I do the Heimlich?" But Maya was already there, already assessing with the systematic approach she'd been learning, the knowledge she'd been absorbing through textbooks and lectures and practice scenarios that had suddenly, terrifyingly become real. This wasn't choking. His airway wasn't blocked by food. This was something else, something that made her blood run cold even as her training kicked in. "Call 911, she said, her voice sharp and clear, cutting through the rising panic. "Now, tell them we have a severe allergic reaction, possible anaphylaxis." His breathing was getting worse, each inhalation of a labored wheeze that spoke of airways closing, of histamines flooding his system, of a body turning against itself. Hives were blooming across his neck, angry welts that spread like fire. His hands were shaking as he tried to speak, but only a scrambled sound emerged. Maya's mind raced through her coursework, through the emergency response training she'd completed just last month. Anaphylaxis, life-threatening, minutes mattered. But what had triggered it? He'd said no allergies. The meatloaf was straightforward: beef, breadcrumbs, eggs, herbs. Unless... "Do you have an EpiPen?" she asked urgently, already knowing the answer from his desperate negative shake of his head. "Anyone have an EpiPen?" she called out to the diner, to Billy, to the young couple who had frozen in their booth, faces pale with shock. Nothing. No one. The man, Marcus, was sliding back into the booth, his movements uncoordinated, his body beginning to fail. Maya knew the statistics, had studied them until the numbers were burned into her memory. Without treatment, anaphylaxis could kill in minutes. 15, maybe 20 if he was lucky. The nearest hospital was 12 minutes away by car, longer for an ambulance to arrive, treat, and transport. She couldn't let him die. Not here, not on her watch, not when there had to be something, anything she could do. "Stay with me," she said, her voice firm, authoritative in a way that surprised even her. She was already thinking, calculating, remembering. The pharmacy next door. It closed at 9, but old Mr. Chen, no relation, though they joked about it, sometimes worked late. And even if he didn't, even if it was locked, there had to be a way. But she couldn't leave this man alone, couldn't risk him losing consciousness while she was gone. "Billy! Billy, come here!" The cook emerged from the kitchen, his face ashen, his hands still clutching a dish towel. "What do we do?" "The ambulance is coming. They said 8 minutes. "That might be too long," Maya said, her hand on Marcus's wrist, feeling his pulse racing, thready and desperate beneath her fingers. "I need you to do exactly what I say. Keep him sitting upright, talk to him, keep him conscious. If he has a jacket, loosen it. If his breathing gets worse, if he loses consciousness, lay him flat and elevate his legs. Do not let him stand up. Understand?" Billy nodded, moving to the booth with obvious reluctance but determination. The young woman from the other table had pulled out her phone, filming with shaking hands. Maya wanted to snap at her to help instead of recording, but there wasn't time, and maybe the footage would be useful later. Maybe it would help someone else. Maya was already moving toward the door, her mind fixed on a singular goal: the pharmacy. Mr. Chen had shown her his emergency supplies once, had pointed out where he kept the EpiPens, the naloxone, the tools that could save lives when minutes mattered. She'd been interested professionally, had asked questions and made mental notes without knowing why. Now she knows. She burst through the diner's door into the cool night air, her shoes slapping against the pavement as she ran the 20 yards to the pharmacy's entrance. The lights were off. The door was locked, but through the glass she could see the faint glow of what might be a back office light. She pounded on the door with both fists, the sound echoing off the buildings, disturbing the quiet street. "Mr. Chen? Mr. Chen, please, medical emergency!" She hammered again harder, her voice rising to a shout. "Please, someone is dying! I need an EpiPen!"
Seconds crawled by like hours. She could see the diner through the pharmacy window, could see Billy leaning over the booth, could imagine Marcus's airways closing further with every passing moment. She pounded again, a desperate rhythm against the glass, and then a light flickered on in the back. Movement. A figure shuffling forward, and then Mr. Chen's face appeared behind the glass, his expression confused, annoyed, then alarmed as he took in Maya's face, the raw desperation written across it. "What's wrong?" he called through the door, but he was already reaching for his keys. "Anaphylaxis. Next door. Man is dying. I need an EpiPen, now." The words came out in staccato bursts, urgent and clear. Mr. Chen's hands fumbled with the lock, and then the door was open and he was gesturing her inside. "How long ago?" "3 minutes, maybe 4. He's deteriorating fast." The old pharmacist was already moving, his earlier irritation transformed into professional focus. He didn't question her, didn't ask for prescriptions or permissions, didn't waste time with the bureaucratic barriers that might have stopped someone less experienced or more rigid. He went straight to the locked cabinet behind the counter, his keys jingling as he searched for the right one. "I have 2, he said, pulling out the yellow and black auto-injectors that looked so small, so simple to hold such power. "Take both. If the first doesn't work within 10 minutes, use the second. You know how to administer?" "Yes," Maya said, though her hands were shaking as she grabbed the EpiPens. She'd practiced on training dummies, had watched videos, had studied the mechanism until she could recite it in her sleep. But this was different. This was real. "Go," Mr. Chen said, already reaching for his phone. "I'll call it in. Make sure the ambulance knows what they're walking into." Maya ran. The diner seemed impossibly far away, though it was only seconds before she was pushing through the door again, her breath coming in gasps that had nothing to do with the short sprint and everything to do with the weight of what she was holding, what she was about to do. Marcus was worse. Even from across the diner, she could see it. His skin had taken on a grayish tinge, his movements were sluggish, and his eyes were losing focus. Billy was talking to him in a steady stream of words that probably made no sense, but the sound of a human voice was something, was a tether to consciousness. "I've got it," Maya said, sliding into the booth across from Marcus. Her training took over, suppressing the panic, focusing her attention. "Sir, can you hear me? I have epinephrine. This is going to help. It's going to hurt for a second, but it will help." His eyes met hers, and in them she saw trust, desperate and complete. He couldn't speak, could barely breathe, but he gave the smallest nod. Maya's hand steadied. She pulled the blue safety cap off the EpiPen, positioned it against his outer thigh, the muscle there, just like in training, and pressed down hard until she heard the click, felt the spring mechanism release. She held it there for 7 seconds, each one crucial, delivering the epinephrine that would reverse the cascade of histamines and open his airways. She pulled the injector away and immediately began massaging the injection site, watching Marcus's face with an intensity that made the rest of the world fake. For a moment, nothing changed. He was still struggling, still dying, and Maya felt a spike of pure terror. What if it didn't work? What if she'd been too slow? What if... And then, a gasp. Different than before, deeper. His chest expanded more fully, his color beginning to shift from that terrible gray towards something more human. The hives weren't disappearing. They wouldn't, not immediately. But his breathing was easing, the desperate wheeze giving way to something less labored. "That's it." Maya breathed her own relief so intense it made her dizzy. "That's it. Keep breathing. You're okay.
You're going to be okay. Marcus's hand reached across the table, fingers trembling as they found hers, squeezed with what little strength he had regained. His lips moved, forming words he couldn't yet speak, but the message in his eyes was clear. Thank you. The sound of sirens cut through the moment, growing louder, and then paramedics were flooding through the diner door, bringing equipment in professional efficiency and the promise of further care. Maya stepped back, giving them space, her legs suddenly shaky as the adrenaline began to drain from her system. "Who administered the epinephrine?" asked one of the paramedics, a woman with kind eyes and quick hands already assessing Marcus's vitals.
"I did," Maya said, her voice smaller now, uncertain. "I'm not certified yet. I'm in pre-nursing, but he was dying and I couldn't—" "You saved his life," the paramedic said firmly, glancing up at her with respect. "Anaphylaxis this severe? Another few minutes and we'd be looking at a very different outcome. You did exactly right." They were loading Marcus onto a gurney now, IV already started, oxygen mask in place. He was conscious, stable, alive, because of a series of choices that had seemed impossible minutes ago. As they wheeled him toward the ambulance, he reached out again, catching Maya's hand. "Your name," he managed, his voice rough but audible behind the mask. "Maya Chen." "Marcus Whitfield," he said, and squeezed her hand once more before the paramedics took him away, the doors of the ambulance closing on the scene, the lights painting red and blue patterns across the diner's windows. Maya stood in the middle of the Riverside Diner, surrounded by overturned coffee cups and the meatloaf that had nearly killed a man, her uniform stained and her hands still trembling, and let herself breathe. Just breathe. Billy was beside her, his face still pale. "Holy shit, Maya! Holy shit!" The young couple had finally stopped filming, and the woman approached with tentative steps. "That was incredible! You were incredible!" But Maya barely heard them. She was thinking about the textbook in her locker, about the exam she'd been so worried about whether she was ready, whether she had what it took to be a nurse. And she realized, standing there in the aftermath of crisis, that maybe she'd already answered that question. Mr. Chen appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. "He's alive," and I felt tears prick at my eyes for the first time, the emotion she'd suppressed flooding back. "He's going to be okay." The old pharmacist nodded satisfied. "You did good, girl. You did real good." The rest of the shift passed in a blur. A police officer came to take a statement. The owner of the diner, roused from bed by Billy's call, arrived in sweatpants and a mix of concern and curiosity. The young couple left an absurdly large tip and made Maya promise to let them know how the man was doing. Billy insisted on giving her the rest of his shift meals for a week. But Maya's mind was elsewhere, was with the man in the ambulance, was replaying those minutes over and over, analyzing what she'd done, what she could have done better, what it meant that she'd held someone's life in her hands and not dropped it. It was past 1 in the morning when she finally locked up, her share of the tips in her pocket, along with a business card the police officer had given her, along with the paramedic's words still echoing in her mind. "You saved his life." She drove to her mother's apartment in her ancient Honda, the one that protested every cold morning but kept running through sheer stubbornness. The city was quiet, the kind of deep night silence that felt sacred, and Maya let herself sink into it, let the tension of the evening slowly unknot from her shoulders. Her mother opened the door before Maya could knock, as if she'd sensed her daughter's arrival. "You're late," she said. But her voice was gentle, not accusatory. Maya Chen had been a waitress herself for 30 years, knew the unpredictability of service work. "Something happened," Maya said, and found herself telling the story, the words spilling out in a rush that left her breathless. Her mother listened, her weathered face moving through expressions of alarm and pride, and when Maya finished, Maria pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace. "Your father would be so proud," she whispered. And Maya felt the familiar ache of loss. Her father had been gone for 5 years, a heart attack in the night, gone before the paramedics arrived. Maybe that's why she'd reacted so fast, so decisively. Maybe some part of her was still trying to save him. She checked on Lily, who was sprawled across the guest bed in that boneless way children sleep, her dark hair fanned across the pillow, a stuffed rabbit clutched in one arm. 6 years old, perfect and innocent, and the reason Maya pushed herself so hard, the reason she worked doubles and studied until her eyes burned and dreamed of a better life. "I love you, baby," she whispered, brushing a kiss against her daughter's forehead. Lily stirred, but didn't wake, lost in whatever dreams occupy the minds of first graders. The drive to her own apartment, a one-bedroom she'd converted into a two by hanging curtains and adding a twin bed for Lily, took 10 minutes through empty streets. She parked in the lot that always had broken glass in one corner, climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, and let herself into the space that was hers, modest and cramped, but paid for by her own work.
She showered, washing away the smell of the diner, the evidence of the night, but not the memory. That, she knew, would stay with her always. The feel of the EpiPen in her hand, the click of the mechanism, the moment when Marcus's breathing changed, when death retreated and life surged forward. She should sleep. She had another shift tomorrow, and Lily would be up early, full of energy and questions. But Maya found herself sitting at her tiny kitchen table, pulling out her anatomy textbook, opening it to the chapter on allergic reactions and anaphylaxis. She read with new understanding, with the knowledge that had been abstract now made concrete. The physiology of histamine release, the cascade of symptoms, the crucial importance of rapid intervention. Every word was familiar, but now it meant something different, something deeper. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Officer Martinez from tonight. Just wanted you to know, Marcus Whitfield is stable and doing well at Cedar General. He's asking for you." Maya stared at the message, surprise and something else, curiosity maybe, or a sense of unfinished business stirring in her chest. Marcus Whitfield. She pulled out her phone and searched the name, and her eyes widened as the results populated. Marcus Whitfield, CEO of Whitfield Industries, a man whose name appeared in business journals and Forbes lists. And she'd saved his life with a borrowed EpiPen and training she'd barely completed? Maya closed her laptop and finally went to bed, slipping between sheets that were clean but worn, her mind too full for sleep despite her exhaustion. Through her window she could see the lights of the city, endless possibilities and hidden dangers, lives intersecting and diverging in patterns too complex to predict. She thought about the choices that had led to this moment, her decision to become a nurse, her habit of asking about allergies, her friendship with Mr. Chen, her refusal to freeze when crisis struck. She thought about Marcus Whitfield's hand in hers, the trust in his eyes, the weight of another person's survival resting on decisions made in seconds. And she thought about tomorrow, about her daughter and her mother and her textbooks and her shifts at the diner, about the exam that suddenly seemed less daunting, about a future that had, in the space of minutes, transformed into something immediate and possible. Outside, the city hummed its perpetual song. Inside, Maya Chen finally slept and dreamed of saving lives. Maya woke to sunlight streaming through the gap in her curtains and the sound of her alarm playing the same cheerful melody that had pulled her from sleep for 3 years straight. She reached for her phone, silenced it, and lay still for a moment, letting the previous night reassemble itself in her memory. For a heartbeat, she wondered if it had been a dream, the choking man, the sprint to the pharmacy, the EpiPen clicking in her hand. But then she saw the business cards on her nightstand, the evidence that it had been real. 6:15 a.m. She had 15 minutes before Lily needed to be up for school, 30 minutes before they needed to be out the door. Maya pushed herself upright, her body protesting with the particular aches of someone who'd spent too many hours on her feet, and padded to the small kitchen to start coffee. The apartment was exactly as she'd left it, lived in but tidy, because clutter made the small space feel suffocating. The living room doubled as her bedroom, her mattress on a simple frame against one wall, a desk salvaged from a curb against another, covered in textbooks and highlighted notes. Through the curtain she'd hung as a divider, she could see Lily's bed, the wall decorated with her daughter's drawings, crayon houses with smiling suns, stick figures holding hands, a child's vision of a perfect world. Maya moved through her morning routine with the efficiency of practice, brewing coffee in the machine her mother had given her last Christmas, pouring a bowl of cereal, spreading peanut butter on bread for Lily's lunch. She thought about the night before as she worked, turning it over in her mind like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit the picture she'd had of her life. She'd saved someone. Not theoretically, not in a practice scenario with a plastic dummy, but actually, truly saved a human being from dying. The knowledge felt heavy and light at the same time, weighty with responsibility and buoyant with possibility. "Mama?" Lily's voice, sleepy and soft, drifted from behind the curtain. "Morning, sweetheart. Time to get up for school." Her daughter emerged moments later, hair tangled from sleep and wearing the oversized t-shirt she insisted on sleeping in because it was comfy. At 6, Lily had Maya's dark hair and her father's hazel eyes. Jason, who'd left when Maya was 3 months pregnant, who'd made promises he'd broken before they were fully spoken. She'd been 19, working at a mall clothing store, living with her mother and believing that love would somehow be enough. She'd learned better, learned that love without commitment was just words, that she'd have to build her own foundation because no one was going to build it for her. "How was Grandma's?" Maya asked Lily as she helped her into her school clothes, jeans and a purple shirt with a unicorn on the front.
Good. She made pancakes and let me stay up to watch the singing show. Lily's face was bright with the simple happiness of being loved by multiple people, of having grandparents who spoiled her, and a mother who kept the harsh edges of the world away from her as much as possible. "Of course she did," Maya said with a smile, brushing her daughter's hair and pulling it into 2 neat braids. "Grandma has different rules than me." "Why?" "Because grandmas are magic and don't need bedtimes." Lily giggled, and the sound was pure enough to make Maya's chest ache with fierce love. Everything she did, the double shifts, the studying until midnight, the careful budgeting that left no room for error, was for this person, this small human who trusted her completely. They ate breakfast together, Lily chattering about a boy at school who could do a handstand, and a girl who brought cupcakes for her birthday, and a teacher who'd read them a story about a dragon. Maya listened with the part of her attention that parenthood had taught her to split, nodding and responding while also thinking about the shift she had that afternoon, the grocery shopping she needed to do, the laundry that was piling up, and Marcus Whitfield, the man she'd saved, the text message saying he was asking for her. She dropped Lily at the elementary school 3 blocks from their apartment, watching until her daughter disappeared through the doors, swallowed by the building full of children and possibility. Then she drove to the community college where she took her pre-nursing courses, parking in the lot that was always too full, walking across campus with her backpack heavy with textbooks. Her first class was Anatomy and Physiology 2, taught by Professor Ramirez, a former ER nurse with stories that made the textbook material come alive. Maya slid in from her usual seat in the 3rd row, pulled out her notebook, and tried to focus as the professor launched into a lecture on the cardiovascular system. But her mind kept drifting back to the diner, to those minutes when everything had narrowed to a single point. Save him. Keep him alive. Don't let him die on your watch. "Miss Chen." Maya's head snapped up. Professor Ramirez was looking at her with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Could you explain the stages of anaphylaxis?" Heat flooded Maya's face, but she stood, her voice steady, as she recited what she'd read last night, what she'd lived through. Anaphylaxis is a severe, life-threatening allergic reaction that occurs rapidly. The first stage involves histamine release, causing hives, itching, and flushing. The second stage affects the respiratory system, bronchospasm, airway swelling, difficulty breathing. The third stage is cardiovascular collapse, hypotension, shock, potential cardiac arrest. Without treatment, typically epinephrine, the reaction can be fatal within minutes. She sat down, aware of her classmates' stares. Professor Ramirez nodded slowly. "Excellent. Have you been studying ahead?" "I witnessed a case last night at my work." The professor's eyebrows rose. "And?" "I administered epinephrine. He survived." The class erupted in whispers. Professor Ramirez raised her hand for silence, then approached Maya's desk. "Stay after class. I want to hear the story." The rest of the lecture passed in a haze. When the other students filed out, Maya approached the professor's desk, feeling like a child called to the principal's office despite being innocent. "Tell me everything," Professor Ramirez said. And Maya did.
the words coming easier this time, the story taking shape into something coherent and complete. When she finished, the professor was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You did everything right, Maya. Everything. The assessment, the decision-making, the administration. That's not just good training. That's instinct, the kind that makes excellent nurses." I was terrified. Good. The day you're not afraid when someone's life is in your hands is the day you should quit. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you careful. The professor leaned forward. "Have you thought about emergency medicine, trauma nursing?" Maya hadn't. She'd been so focused on just becoming a nurse, just passing her boards, just getting a job that would let her support Lily properly, that she hadn't considered specializations. I don't know. Would I even be qualified? With the right training, absolutely. You have something that can't be taught, Maya. You have the ability to act under pressure without freezing. That's rare. The professor's words stayed with Maya through her next class, through the lunch she ate in her car to save money, through the afternoon as she drove to the Riverside Diner for her shift. She kept turning the idea over. Emergency medicine, trauma, the kind of high-stakes environment where last night would be Tuesday, not an anomaly.
The diner was different in the afternoon light, less melancholy and more simply tired, a place that existed in the margins. Billy was already there, prepping the kitchen, and he broke into a huge grin when he saw her. "The hero returns," he announced, and Maya rolled her eyes, but she was smiling too. "Stop it. I just did what anyone would do." "No," Billy said seriously. "Most people would have frozen, would have waited for the ambulance. You didn't." The shift began, and Maya fell into the familiar rhythm, taking orders, delivering food, refilling coffee cups, smiling at regulars, and chatting with tourists who'd stopped off the highway. But she was aware, in a new way, of how she observed people, the way she noticed the elderly man's tremor as he lifted his coffee cup, the young woman who wasn't eating despite ordering food, the construction worker who kept rubbing his chest. Patterns, signs, stories written in posture and complexion and behavior. Around 3 p.m., the door chimed, and Maya looked up from wiping down a table to see someone who clearly didn't belong in the Riverside Diner. A woman in her 40s, wearing a tailored pantsuit and carrying a leather briefcase, her hair in a sleek bob, her presence commanding attention without effort. She approached the counter where Maya was standing. "I'm looking for Maya Chen." "That's me," Maya said, setting down her towel, suddenly aware of her stained uniform and her tired appearance. The woman's expression softened into something warmer. "I'm Jennifer Santos, executive assistant to Marcus Whitfield. He asked me to find you." Maya's heart did a complicated skip. "Is he okay?" "He's fine. Released from the hospital this morning with strict instructions and a new appreciation for ingredient labels." Jennifer's smile was genuine. "He wanted me to deliver this personally." She handed Maya an envelope, heavy cream stationery that felt expensive even before opening. Inside was a handwritten note on cardstock embossed with a simple MW at the top. "Maya, there are no words adequate to thank someone for saving your life, but I'm going to try anyway. What you did last night was extraordinary. Not just the technical skill, but the courage to act when others would have hesitated. You are remarkable. I would very much like to meet with you properly, to express my gratitude in person, and to learn more about the person I owe my life to. My assistant, Jennifer, will coordinate a time that works for you. I understand you're studying to be a nurse. I hope you'll allow me to help with that in some small way. With profound gratitude, Marcus." Maya read it twice, 3 times, her hands shaking slightly. This is too much. I was just doing what anyone should do, but rarely does," Jennifer interrupted gently. "Marcus is a good man, Miss Chen. He doesn't offer help lightly, and he never forgets a debt. Will you meet with him?" Before we continue with what happens next,
If you're finding Maya's story inspiring, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your support means everything. Maya thought about her life, the careful balance of work and school and parenting, the budget that left no margin for error, the dreams she harbored but didn't speak aloud because speaking them felt like tempting fate. She thought about Lily, about the opportunities she wanted to give her daughter, about the nursing career that felt simultaneously close and impossibly distant. "Yes," she said. "I'll meet with him." Jennifer's smile widened. "Excellent! Are you free tomorrow evening? Say 7 o'clock? I can send a car." "A car? To take her where?" Maya almost laughed at the surreal nature of the conversation. Yesterday, she'd been worried about making rent. Today, a billionaire's assistant was offering to send a car. "I'll need to arrange childcare. My daughter—" "Of course. Take my card. Call me when you've confirmed, and we'll finalize the details." After Jennifer left, Maya stood holding the business card and the note, feeling Billy's eyes on her from the kitchen. "What was that about?" he called. "I have no idea," Maya said honestly, "but I think my life just got weird." The rest of her shift passed in a distracted blur. She made mistakes, gave someone decaf instead of regular, forgot an order of fries, had to redo a ticket because her handwriting was illegible. Her mind was elsewhere, spinning through possibilities and anxieties in equal measure. What did Marcus Whitfield want? The note mentioned helping with nursing school, but what did that mean? A recommendation letter? Advice? Something more tangible that she wasn't letting herself consider because the hope felt dangerous? She finished her shift at 8 p.m., her feet aching and her mind exhausted from the mental gymnastics of the day. As she drove home, she called her mother, explaining the situation in quick, breathless sentences. "A billionaire wants to thank you properly," Maria said, her voice warm with pride, but also edged with the caution of someone who'd seen too many promises broken. "That's wonderful, mija. But be careful, okay? Rich people, sometimes they help because it makes them feel good, not because they really see you." "I know, Mama," Maya said, though she didn't, not really. She'd never moved in circles where billionaires existed as anything other than abstractions, names in newspapers and faces on magazine covers. "But still," her mother continued, "you should go. You earned this. You saved his life." Maya picked up Lily from aftercare, listening to her daughter's chatter about art class and the chapter book her teacher was reading aloud, and felt the familiar tug between gratitude for what they had and yearning for what they didn't. Their life wasn't bad. Lily was happy, healthy, loved, but it was precarious, balanced on the edge of Maya's ability to work enough hours while staying sane, to pay the bills while saving for the future, to be present for her daughter while building towards something better. That night, after Lily was asleep, Maya stood in front of her small closet, surveying her limited wardrobe with growing despair. Meeting a billionaire required something more than her work uniform or her casual clothes, but she didn't own anything remotely appropriate. Her nice clothes consisted of one black dress she wore to funerals and job interviews, slightly dated but clean. It would have to do. She called Jennifer the next morning before her shift and confirmed 7 p.m., trying to keep her voice steady, professional, like this was normal, like she met with CEOs regularly. "Perfect," Jennifer said. "The car will pick you up at 6:30. We're meeting at Marcus's office. He thought it would be more comfortable than a restaurant, more private. Dress is business casual, and Maya, don't be nervous. He's looking forward to this." Easy for her to say, Maya thought after hanging up. Jennifer probably met with powerful people every day. This wasn't her life being quietly, inexplicably transformed. Maya arranged for her mother to watch Lily overnight, just in case the meeting ran late. She worked her morning shift at the diner in a fog of anticipation and anxiety, dropped Lily at school, attended her classes without really absorbing anything, and then went home to prepare. She showered longer than usual,
used the expensive shampoo she saved for special occasions, shaved her legs, moisturized, painted her nails a subtle pink. She dried her hair carefully, letting it fall straight down her back instead of pulling it into her usual ponytail. She put on makeup, not too much. She didn't want to look like she was trying too hard, but enough to look polished, professional, like someone who deserved to be in the same room as Marcus Whitfield. But her hands were shaking. At 6:25, she kissed Lily goodbye at her mother's apartment, accepted her reassurances that she looked beautiful, and went downstairs to wait. At precisely 6:30, a sleek black car pulled up, the kind with tinted windows and a driver in a suit. The driver opened the door for her. "Miss Chen, I'm Robert. Mr. Whitfield sent me to collect you."
"Thank you," Maya said, sliding into the leather interior that smelled of money and privilege. The seats were more comfortable than her couch. There was a bottle of water waiting in the cup holder, along with a small box of expensive chocolates. The drive took 40 minutes through evening traffic, the city transforming from familiar neighborhoods to downtown skyscrapers that caught the setting sun and threw it back in shades of gold and amber. Robert was quiet, professional, and Maya was grateful not to have to make conversation. She watched the city slide by and tried to calm the flutter of nerves in her stomach. They pulled up to a building that was all glass and steel, modern and imposing, with Whitfield Industries etched into the stone above the entrance. Robert opened her door, gestured toward the entrance where a security guard was waiting. "Miss Chen," the guard said with a nod. "Mr. Whitfield is expecting you. 23rd floor, elevator bank on your right. Jennifer will meet you there." Maya's heels clicked against the marble floor of the lobby, echoing in the vast space. Everything was clean lines and expensive materials, the kind of place where people made decisions that affected thousands of lives. She felt small and out of place, but she forced herself to stand straight, to walk with confidence she didn't entirely feel. The elevator was empty, rising smoothly and silently. She watched the numbers climb, 10, 15, 20, and wondered what she was doing here, what she'd gotten herself into. The doors opened onto a reception area that was all muted elegance. Jennifer was there, smiling warmly. "Maya, you made it! Come, he's in his office." They walked down a hallway lined with art that Maya suspected was original and expensive, past offices where people were still working despite the late hour, to a set of double doors at the end. Jennifer knocked once, then opened the door. "Maya Chen, sir." The office was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a view that made Maya's breath catch. But she barely noticed the expensive furniture, or the art, or the shelves lined with books and awards, because Marcus Whitfield was standing, walking toward her with his hand extended and a smile that was genuine and warm. He looked different than he had in the diner, still tired, but healthy, alive in a way he hadn't been when she'd last seen him. He wore slacks and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking more human and less like the polished executive she'd expected. "Maya?" he said, and his handshake was firm but not crushing. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit. Can I get you anything? Coffee, tea, water?" "Water would be great," Maya said, her mouth suddenly dry. She sat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk, and he brought her a bottle. Glass, not plastic, with a label in French. He sat across from her, not behind his desk, but in the matching chair, creating a sense of equality that Maya suspected was deliberate. For a moment, they just looked at each other, and Maya saw in his eyes the memory of what they'd shared, those minutes when he'd been dying and she'd refused to let him go. "I owe you my life," he said simply. "I've been thinking about how to adequately express that, and I'm not sure it's possible, but I want to try." Maya set down her water, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from trembling. "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Whitfield. I did what anyone would." "Please, call me Marcus." "And no," he interrupted gently, "you didn't do what anyone would. You did what someone extraordinary would do. Someone with training, yes, but also with courage and quick thinking and a willingness to take responsibility. Do you know how rare that is?" She didn't know how to respond to that, so she stayed quiet. Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Jennifer told me you're in nursing school, pre-nursing technically. working at the diner to pay for it while raising a daughter on your own. Is that right?" Maya nodded, feeling exposed, like her whole life was laid bare in those few sentences. "That's remarkable," he said. "Do you know what I was doing at your age? Working in my father's company, coasting on nepotism and privilege, convinced I'd earned everything that had been handed to me. It took me another decade to realize how lucky I'd been, how much of my success was circumstance rather than merit." He stood, walking to the windows, his silhouette framed against the glittering city. "The other night, when I couldn't breathe, when I felt my body shutting down, I thought about my children. My son Nathan, 17, wants to be a marine biologist. My daughter Sophie's 15, thinks she wants to be a lawyer but changes her mind every week. I thought about all the moments I'd miss. Graduations, weddings, grandchildren. I thought about dying alone in a diner because I'd been too careless to check ingredients, too arrogant to carry an EpiPen despite knowing I had sensitivities. And then you were there. You didn't hesitate. You acted. And because of you, I get to see those moments. I get to be a father and hopefully someday a grandfather. I get to keep living." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I'm glad you're okay."
"I want to help you," Marcus said, returning to his chair. "With nursing school, with your daughter, with building the life you're working so hard to create. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering gratitude and investment in someone who has already proven they deserve it." Maya's heart was racing. What kind of help? Full tuition for your nursing program, including any graduate work you want to pursue. A monthly stipend to cover living expenses so you can cut back on shifts at the diner and focus on school. Childcare expenses, books, supplies, whatever you need. He paused. "And when you graduate, a guaranteed position at Whitfield Memorial Hospital. We own 3 hospitals in the metro area. You'd have your choice of departments and a competitive salary." Maya couldn't speak. The numbers he was talking about, they were life-changing. They were the difference between struggling and thriving, between dreaming and achieving. "Why?" she managed finally. "This is too much. I saved your life, yes, but this is..." "Proportional," Marcus said firmly. "You gave me back my life, Maya. Every day I get from this point forward is because of you. Every moment with my children, every project I complete, every person I might be able to help, it's all possible because you acted when it mattered. You think a few years of tuition is too much compensation for that?" When he put it that way, when she let herself really consider what she'd given him, it made a certain kind of sense. But she was also aware of her mother's warning, of the reality that people who had resources sometimes dangled them for reasons that had nothing to do with genuine care. "I need to think about it," she said, though every practical part of her brain was screaming at her to say yes immediately, to grab this opportunity with both hands. Marcus smiled, not seeming offended. "Of course, this is a big decision. But Maya, I want you to know there are no strings attached. You're not obligated to me beyond what you already did. If you take this help, it's because you deserve it, because you've earned it, not because you'll owe me something in return." "Can I ask you something?" Maya said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Anything. What were you doing at the Riverside Diner that night? No offense, but you don't exactly fit the usual clientele." Marcus laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. "Honestly, I was having a terrible day. Board meeting that went badly, a fight with my son about college, an ex-wife who's angry about something that happened a decade ago. I was driving around trying to clear my head, saw your diner and thought, why not? Sometimes you just need to sit somewhere anonymous and eat meatloaf, you know?" Maya did know. She'd had plenty of days where the diner had been her refuge, where the familiar routine had been the thing holding her together. "The universe has a sense of humor," she said. "You pick a random diner to decompress, order the meatloaf and end up in anaphylaxis, and get saved by a nursing student who keeps EpiPens in her mental inventory of nearby resources. Yeah, the universe definitely has a sense of humor." They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing more naturally than Maya had expected. Marcus asked about Lily, about her classes, about what kind of nursing she wanted to do. She found herself telling him about her father's death, about how helpless she felt, how that had planted the seed of wanting to help people in crisis. He told him about his own journey, inheriting a company he hadn't built, the years of feeling like an imposter, the slow process of actually earning his position through work and decision-making. He talked about his divorce, about the challenge of being a good father while running a corporation, about the guilt that came with privilege. "I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately," he said, as the evening deepened outside the windows. "Not just the company, but what I leave behind in terms of impact. I donate money, yes, but that's easy. Writing checks doesn't require anything but wealth. I want to do more. I want to help people who actually make a difference, people like you. I'm just one person. I'm not special. You saved my life with 2 minutes of training and a borrowed EpiPen. You're working 2 jobs while going to school and raising a child. You asked me about allergies before I ordered, a question most waitresses don't bother with. You noticed I was in trouble before I probably fully realized it myself. Maya, you're absolutely special. You just don't see it yet." When Jennifer knocked on the door at 9 p.m., Maya was surprised by how much time had passed. "I should go," she said, standing. "My daughter." "Of course," Marcus said, standing as well. "Think about my offer, please. Take all the time you need. But Maya, whatever you decide, I meant what I said. You're remarkable." The drive home felt surreal, like she'd stepped into someone else's life for a few hours. Robert dropped her at her mother's apartment, and she found Maria still awake, waiting with anxious curiosity. "Well," her mother demanded, "tell me everything." Maya did, the words tumbling out in a rush. Her mother listened, her expression cycling through shock and joy and concern. "That's amazing, mija," Maria said when Maya finished. "But are you sure? Men like that, they don't give without expecting something." "He said there were no strings," Maya replied, but she heard the doubt in her own voice. "Maybe he believes that now," her mother said gently. "But money has weight, Maya. It creates obligations even when we don't mean it to. Just be careful, okay? Protect yourself. Protect Lily." Maya carried Lily to the car, her daughter heavy with sleep, and drove home through streets that looked the same but felt different. She put Lily to bed without waking her, then sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and the business card Jennifer had given her. On the back, Marcus had written a number, his personal cell, with a note, "When you're ready to talk. No pressure. M." Maya stared at it for a long time, wrestling with hope and fear in equal measure. Could she trust this? Did she deserve it? The tea grew cold while she sat there, until finally exhaustion won and she went to bed, no closer to a decision than when the evening had started. She dreamed of her father that night, of him smiling and nodding, saying nothing, but somehow communicating everything she needed to hear. When she woke in the morning, sun streaming through her window and Lily singing softly in the other room, Maya knew what she was going to do. She was going to say yes. Not because it was easy, not because she was certain it was right, but because sometimes you had to take a leap of faith, had to trust that the universe that had put her in that diner that night had a reason, had a plan that was bigger than her fear. She picked up her phone and texted the number Marcus had given her. "I'd like to accept your offer. When can we discuss the details?" The response came within minutes. "Today, if you're free. Name the time and place. I'll be there." Maya smiled, feeling something loosen in her chest. Not certainty exactly, but possibility. The feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine, and that maybe, just maybe, she was ready for it. They met at a cafe near the community college, a neutral space that felt more appropriate than either the diner where she worked or the corporate tower where he reigned. Maya arrived first, ordering a coffee she didn't really want just to have something to do with her hands, sitting at a table by the window where she could watch the street and collect herself. Marcus arrived exactly on time,
dressed more casually than their first meeting, jeans and a blazer, like he was trying to bridge the gap between their worlds. He ordered his own coffee and joined her, and if anyone in the cafe recognized him as one of the city's wealthiest men, they didn't show it. "Thank you for agreeing to this," he said, pulling out a folder from his bag. "I had my legal team drop the paperwork. It's straightforward, no hidden clauses, no obligations beyond what we discussed." Maya took the papers, scanning the dense legal language that might as well have been hieroglyphics. "I should probably have a lawyer look at this." "You absolutely should," Marcus agreed. "I can recommend someone if you don't have anyone, someone who would represent your interests, not mine." "Okay, I'll do that." They talked about logistics, the timeline for tuition payments, the stipend that would be deposited monthly, the process for reimbursing childcare and educational expenses. Marcus had thought of everything, anticipated questions Maya hadn't even considered. "There's one more thing," he said as their meeting was wrapping up. "Completely optional, but I wanted to mention it. We're hosting a fundraiser gala next month for the Whitfield Memorial Hospital Foundation. I'd like you to come as my guest, to meet some people, to see what the hospital community is like. You might find it valuable, networking-wise, but truly, no pressure." Maya's first instinct was to refuse. A gala meant a fancy dress she didn't own, meant being surrounded by rich people who would take one look at her and know I didn't belong. But she also thought about what Professor Ramirez had said about opportunities, about not letting fear make her decisions. "I'll think about it," she said, which seemed to be her default response to Marcus's offers. He smiled. "That's all I ask." Over the following weeks, Maya's life transformed in ways both obvious and subtle. The first tuition check cleared, followed by the stipend that was more money than she'd ever had in her account at once. She cut her hours at the diner from 6 shifts a week to 3, giving her actual time to study, to sleep, to be present with Lily.
The difference was immediate and profound. Without the constant exhaustion of working doubles, her grades improved. She understood the material more deeply, had time to go to office hours, to form study groups with classmates. Professor Ramirez noticed the change, pulled her aside after class one day. "Whatever you're doing differently, keep doing it," the professor said. "You're thriving, Maya." She was. For the first time in years, she had breathing room, space to think about more than just survival. She could take Lily to the zoo on a Saturday without calculating whether they could afford the admission. She could buy groceries without mentally tallying every item. She could sleep without waking in panic about bills due and balances overdrawn. But with the relief came new tensions, complications she hadn't anticipated. At the diner, her co-workers noticed the change. Billy was happy for her, genuinely pleased that her hard work was paying off. But others were less generous. Sandra, who'd worked there for 15 years and wore her bitterness like armor, made comments. "Must be nice," she'd said one shift, watching Maya leave early for class, "having a rich boyfriend to pay your way." Maya had frozen, stung. "It's not like that. He's just—" "Sure, honey, that's what they all say." Sandra's smile was sharp. "Just wait. Men like that always want something eventually." The words burrowed under Maya's skin, found the doubts she'd been trying to suppress. Was she naive? Was she setting herself up for disappointment or worse? She mentioned it to her mother during their weekly dinner, testing the waters. "People are jealous," Maria said, spooning rice onto Lily's plate. "They see someone getting ahead and they want to pull them back down. Don't let them." "But what if they're right?" Maya asked quietly, aware of Lily coloring nearby, not wanting her daughter to hear her uncertainty. Her mother's expression softened. "Then you deal with them when they appear, but you can't refuse help because you're afraid of maybe owing something someday. That's not life, mija. That's just fear." The legal review of Marcus's contract came back clean. No hidden clauses, no concerning language. Exactly what it purported to be. Maya signed the papers with a mix of relief and lingering unease, unable to fully shake the feeling that something this good couldn't be real, couldn't last.
"Then they're not looking hard enough,"
her mother said firmly. You saved a man's life, Maya. You're going to school to save more. These people and their expensive clothes and fancy jewelry, what have they done? Made money? Inherited companies? You've earned your place. Don't you dare forget that. The Riverside Hotel was lit up like a jewel, valets taking cars, people in evening wear streaming through doors held open by uniforms doormen. Maya forced herself to walk with her head high. Inside, the ballroom was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers, flowers that probably cost more than her car, tables set with china and silver that gleamed under soft lighting. You look stunning. Marcus appeared at her elbow, elegant in a tuxedo, his smile genuine and warm. He offered his arm. Come on, let me introduce you to some people. He guided her through the crowd with easy confidence, stopping at clusters of guests. Doctors and donors, hospital administrators and board members, all polite and interested when Marcus explained how they'd met. Maya saved my life, he'd say, and people would look at her with new respect, asking questions about the incident that she answered with increasing confidence. During dinner, seated at Marcus's table between a cardiac surgeon and a philanthropist, Maya found herself discussing her nursing program, her goals, her dreams of working in emergency medicine. The surgeon was particularly interested, asking thoughtful questions, offering advice. When Marcus stood to give his speech as foundation chairman, Maya watched him command the room with practiced ease. He spoke about the importance of community health, about unexpected heroes, about second chances. 6 weeks ago, I collapsed in a diner. A young woman I'd never met performed CPR that saved my life. She didn't hesitate. She didn't think about who I was or what I could do for her. She just acted. That's the kind of person we should all aspire to be. The applause was thunderous. People turned to look at Maya, smiling, nodding. She felt her cheeks flush but kept her composure. After the speech, Marcus returned to her side. There's someone I want you to meet, he said, guiding her toward an older woman with kind eyes. Dr. Patricia Chen, this is Maya Chen. No relation, but she's studying to become a nurse. Patricia is the head of emergency medicine at Whitfield Memorial. Dr. Chen's handshake was firm. Marcus tells me you're exceptional. We have a new program for nursing students who show promise in emergency care. I'd love to talk to you about it. As they spoke, Maya realized what Marcus had done. The gala wasn't about gratitude or showing her his world. It was about opening doors, making connections, giving her opportunities she'd never have found on her own. Later, as the evening wound down, Maya found Marcus on the balcony, looking out over the city. Thank you, she said simply. He turned, smiling. You earned this, Maya, every bit of it. I just made sure the right people knew your name. Standing there in her borrowed jewelry and beautiful dress, Maya finally understood. This wasn't about owing anyone anything. It was about what her mother had said, accepting help, taking chances, believing she deserved good things. She'd earned her place, and she was ready for whatever came next. 18 months later, Maya Chen stood in the emergency department of Whitfield Memorial Hospital, her navy blue scrubs bearing the title she'd worked so hard to earn, registered nurse. The familiar adrenaline of a trauma call thrummed through her veins as paramedics burst through the doors with a teenage girl in respiratory distress. Possible anaphylaxis, the lead paramedic called out, found her at a restaurant, ate something with shellfish. Maya's hands moved with practiced confidence, her training and instinct working in perfect harmony. She had the girl stabilized within minutes, watching her color return, her breathing ease. As the teenager's frightened mother clutched Maya's hand in gratitude, Maya thought about that night in the diner, how one moment of courage had changed everything. Lily was thriving in second grade now, talking about becoming a doctor someday. Maria had finally retired, spending her days gardening and spoiling her granddaughter.
And Marcus had become an unexpected friend, someone who checked in occasionally, who'd attended Maya's graduation with genuine pride. But the greatest gift hadn't been the money or the connections. It had been the chance to become exactly who she was meant to be. Someone who didn't freeze when seconds mattered. Someone who saved lives. As Maya finished her shift that evening, she passed a young nursing student observing in the ER, looking nervous and uncertain. Maya paused, offered an encouraging smile. "You've got this," she said simply. "Trust your training, trust yourself." Because sometimes that's all it took. One moment of belief. One choice to act instead of hesitate. One life saved that changed 2 lives forever. Thanks for staying until the end of Maya's incredible journey. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales of everyday heroes who change lives in unexpected moments.